Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the game that really got a lot of fans worried. That was West Coast versus Port Adelaide. Joe, West Coast, they really stunk last year, and then they come out and do this in the preseason. We'll talk about the results in a little bit, but did you kind of expect this to happen?
A little bit, actually.
Yeah.
A lot of West Coast woes last year, unfortunately, came from the lack of availability of their best players.
Mm-hmm.
They're all out there now, or not all of them. They were without Nick Natanui, who I think embodies West Coast more than anybody at this point in time. But they still beat the power. Oh boy. There's a blackout. There's a power outage. Hinkley's gonna go. The fans want him gone, and the boys are doing everything they can to make him be sacked at this point.
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a mutiny, doesn't it? I mean, people are talking about Hinkley's going to last the year. You know, they've got someone in mind, but he might last the year. If they come out and get another 0-5 or not even winning score at the first 5 or 6 games, he could be gone before the bye rounds, which is fantastic for North fans because we've got their first pick. But boy, oh boy, like they're in a bit of trouble. Maybe it's preseason hype. They'll change some things up, but West Coast gave them a shellacking.
They really did. It's really surprising, I think, considering all of the hype that was around Port Adelaide with the acquisition of Rioli Jr. and one Jason Horne-Francis, who, I don't know, you just don't feel like these guys are really dishing out as much as what Port would have hoped. Obviously, their new acquisition to the club is going to take time for them to gel. But when you're a team that has serious, aspirations to contend, to play finals, and the recruits that you have a fairly high profile, unfortunately, time is not something that you can be afforded. There's a lot of expectations and demands, and there's a lot of, as we're talking about, a lot of heat and pressure on the head coach's position. They need to be firing right away.
Yeah. I mean, for a team that doesn't have a Josh Kennedy up forward, still trying to work out their forward mix, to be able to score what they did, it's fantastic. So West Coast won 13-6-84 to Port Adelaide's 11-10-76. So maybe if Port had kicked a few more goals instead of behinds, they would have obviously won. But credit where credit's due, right? West Coast came out, they did their thing, really accurate up front, and they showed kind of why they're the best team, I guess, or at least that have the most fans in Perth.
Well, bad kicking is bad football, as they say. And if you're not converting in front of the big sticks, well, that's on you. That's bad luck. And I know for sure that, your mob were certainly very happy that Richmond missed so much last year, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have won. So it doesn't matter. The 4 points are the 4 points. The win is the win. And if you didn't take your chances, well, you don't deserve to win. Plain simple. It's not just about making opportunities. It's about taking them as well. And we saw that the West Coast Eagles were good enough to take the chances that they had. And their players were really exciting compared to Port Adelaide, who unfortunately their forward line was missing a lot of firepower. You can just see that without Dixon playing, it's an entirely different team that just seems to be a bit toothless. It was great that they had a guy like Orazio Fantasia playing and play out the whole game, which was great, right, for him and for BT alike.
Yeah.
But you just didn't get the output from the other forwards. And Jeremy Finlayson is also another big out from that forward line as well.
They seem really dependent on a couple of players down at Port. Their midfield mix is good. Boak, Wines, even Horne-Francis coming in. Butters, Rosie, those kind of players are fantastic. Their defense is okay. I'd rate it as an okay. But they rely on a couple of key players at that club. If they can't get their ruck situation right, with Lysette being in there, with Tickle, I know they kind of got shuffled around a little bit. A few other players as well. And even their forward line too. You just can't rely on Marshall. This is Todd Marshall. You can't rely on him to do everything. And I think they do that a little bit too much. Georgiadis and a few other players don't really stand up to the level that they have to and take the pressure off. They just get found out way too much. And maybe it is a Hinkley. I think some of these people, when you've been at a club for so long, you get complacent. And I know with Brad Scott at North did it. I know with Clarko towards his end, they did it as well. These guys who've been coaching at a club for, 8, 9, 10 years, the game goes past them a little bit. And I'm just wary that that's happened to Hinkley. And then they're just kind of coasting along, as we said at the start, to potentially end of the year when he gets dropped, or even middle of the year when, if the results aren't good enough to make finals. Because it's really finals or bust at a minimum for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure Koshi himself already put it on made it very publicly known that it's finals or bust. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if it looks early on in the season that finals aren't going to be achievable, then you definitely wouldn't want to be Ken Hinkley in that situation. Because you're 100% right. They really do rely on very few. Their backline, they're very reliant on Alir to stand up and do some sensational individual efforts. In the middle, I still consider Boak, even in this later age, to be one of their most influential midfielders. The way he gets a clearance out with a clean kick out of the centre bounce is really important for them. Obviously, they're going to put more responsibility on Butters and Rosie to step up in addition to Wines. But I think there's starting to be a greater emergence, I suppose, and reliance on a guy like Sam Powell-Pepper, who I think who busts his ass off and really tries hard. He's solid. He throws himself around. And I think they need a bit more of that type of player, someone who's willing to throw themselves at the ball and win. It just seemed like they don't have many of those go-getters, personally speaking. It might be my Vic bias and me not watching enough Port games to identify others of that caliber. But it just seemed like there's too many, that there are a lot of passengers that just seem to be looking to play a role, a very definitive role, and not really put themselves out there and give it all they've got.
I think
it just
that's been a big issue for them too. We've spoken about a little bit who did poorly at Port, but there's a couple of players who did really well. So Rosie's kind of cemented himself into everyone's teams now. I think he obviously no Butters in the side, but outside of that, just dominated for them. And then Junior Rioli did quite well as his first kind of hit out with the new club, and Fantasia, like you said. So there is some hope for Port fans. It's not all doom and gloom. You're not going to win the wooden spoon, but that'd be fantastic for North fans. But it's not all doom and gloom. I agree with you on the role player front. Is there anyone from West Coast that kind of shown out for you, Joe?
Yeah, I think shown out is a bit of a strong word, but I definitely think though that the role that Sheed has is really positive. But probably I think the most exciting player that we saw Supercoach wise, I think in particular, has got to be Yo. I think Yo has really cemented himself as a real lock. And if you don't have Elliot Yo, then you're really just going to be it's going to be death by 1,000 cuts. This guy is going to score big every single game, especially for his price. It's an amazingly good price for the role that he's got, and not just for the role, because you can have a good role but not perform well. Like Sheed, I thought Sheed had a really good role, but he just simply didn't perform. Whereas a guy like Yo, he had the role and he performed. He was really, really good. If you don't start him, you're in major trouble, man.
Yeah, there's a few good rookies in there as well. So Campbell Chesser kind of showing why he was taken at such a low pick, or such a high pick, I guess. It's low, but it's really picking the teens. Allen did quite well as well, up forward for them. And I think even Jimby would have been a great scene. I think he still had his foot injury there. So there's some really good signs coming out of that club. For one who, hey, West Coast was touted to kind of be the retirement village last year, and then the year before. We've got too many aging players, blah, blah, blah. Shannon Hearn's still playing. There is some youth and some shining lights in there that fans can be excited about, and then we can be excited about Supercoach-wise. If these guys are mature age players, they've been in the system 3 or 4 years, they're playing, they're locked into 22 like it seems like, they're a real option for us in Supercoach.
Even a youngster like Hewitt. Hewitt looks really good. He played in the later half, so in the later stage, he didn't play in the 4 quarters where the best 22 were playing. He was playing in more so like the waffle, such VFL side of things. But he looks really good. Very impressive young man. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets a gig. These youngsters that the Eagles are unearthing are really promising. And like you said, Campbell Chester was probably the biggest shame that he wasn't able to play with all of the hype and the glowing reports that were coming out about him impressing, McGovern as well really early
I
on.
mean, Jinby,
It's a
Jinby, not Chesser.
Jimby. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Jimby. Yeah, Jimby. Sorry. Yeah, him not playing was a real shame. It would have been great to see him play, especially with the role that he's been earmarked to have, playing primarily halfback and rotating through the middle, swapping with Yo. So if Yo looked that good, it might be great to see just how awesome Jimby will be. I'm not sure if he's playing this week. I really hope he is because he's one that you really want to keep an eye on to see if he's going to play. 171K is not a small amount of money to pay for a player that you're not 100% sure on. So it would be definitely great to see him get a game. And Oscar Allen, you mentioned him. Look, I'm not a big fan of key forwards. Everyone knows that by now, but he looked really good. He looked really promising. The problem with them, though, is that a lot of times he was taking a mark maybe 70 meters away from goal and then him being the kick inside 50. So if he's going to have that role, he's going to be away from the goals. He might be starved of opportunity. I don't know. You got to keep a close eye on him. But for 210K, look, if you want to key forward, there are definitely a lot cheaper options, right?
It really depends on it for me because Port, we've spoken about them relying on Alir a lot. He'll probably end up on a Darling or Allen. If West Coast are versing a Melbourne that have two really good key defenders, then Allen might get double teamed, so he won't be scoring and doing as well. So it's a wait and see in the preseason to kind of see who they match up on, if he's going to dominate again or if he's going to be susceptible to the double team. Because, he was the third tall when Kennedy and Darling and he were playing, which allows him to be a lot more free because teams aren't playing three talls, right? So I think as kind of being the reliance player, it's really going to be kind of setting up that way. So wait and see. I know you hate key forwards, Joe. Key forwards are like the devil. You're like, get out of my team. I don't like you,
Get the holy water.
Get the holy water on them. But yeah, wait and see to see what happens. These kind of players, Curnow last year got to 450K. It's not the same type of player, but they say play the same type of role. If Allen comes out and scores 100, his cash gen is going to skyrocket. So you don't want to miss out on these types, but it's more a risk versus reward. Can you have the low scores? Are the low scores low enough or high enough that it's still better to have him versus a rookie, basically?
Now, the low scores are going to be way too low, unfortunately, because he's going to be playing full forward all the time. He's got his two easiest games in the first 2 weeks, after which his run gets really hard. I am not a proponent. I'm not going to say no, guys. I'm just going to tell you that Joe hates the pick. All right? That's all. You can do it. I'm not going to say no. Huh?
Let's check out the midfield minutes.
Yeah, we'll check out the midfield minutes. Here are the midfield minutes. Thank you so much to Matt Forrest once again for doing the Lord's work, giving us these statistics. We absolutely love to see it. And I did mention that Sheed had a great role. You can see what it is. 72% CBAs. The number one guy for the Eagles in the midfield. Yo with 60%. Beautiful. With also halfback and kick-ins was sensational. Kelly, Gaff, O'Neill, Cully. Cully was one that some people were talking about, but for his price, I probably wouldn't go that far.
I think a Callahan and some other guys kind of offer a bit more than what Cully does for the price. Really interesting to see kind of Sheed and Yo being two guys around that 300 to mid 300 mark in Supercoach, which does give you a lot of money and a lot of space to earn some pretty good money. Having those guys kind of being the best two players in the Eagles midfield mix is bloody fantastic for us. Looking over at Port, Horne-Francis, 76%. I think he had a much better game than the intra-club the week before. But I just don't know at that price if he's such an option. He really needs to average closer to 100 at 386K to actually be viable. I think, if you're going to be playing someone, maybe you get Fife, or if you're going to be playing someone in the midfield, you probably get Sheed. Guys who are established, who've done the role before. And then Horne-Francis doing that without Butters in the team as well. Those midfield time may drop down quite a lot more with him in the team. So see what happens. Wine, 64%, Rosie, 52%, Jones, 40%, which I think is a bit exciting. Drew, 20%, and then Powell Pepper, 20%. So guys, a couple of players who I think alongside a lot of teams this year are going to be rotating through half forward into the midfield. That's definitely what they've done here. They haven't got any of these guys who really play defense, barring like a Jones, but I think he's more doing wing this year and then midfield. Yeah, what's your thoughts, Joe?
Well, obviously, Butters also has to be involved in this mix at some point. When he returns as well, he's going to,
and Boak.
And
Boak as well.
Yeah, of course. And Boak, by reports, he's going to be fine. Yes, he was hit, but there was no structural damage, so it's likely that he will still be able to play. I was sort of hoping to see more midfield minutes out of Rosie, to be completely honest with you. I was hoping, especially with the absence of a guy like Butters, that he'd be up around the 60% mark. But if he get 52% CBAs, look, it doesn't matter because the vast majority of the competition is going to have him in their forward lines, and you're sort of being safe in having him in your team, even if you're not the biggest believer in his scoring. I think this was just, a preseason game, a practice game. Keep an eye on him. He is without a doubt probably the most talented player out there, the classiest player out there for them right now at the moment. They're going to want the ball in his hands a lot. And when he drifts forward, he can kick a goal. That one that he kicked running away from the goals, a drop punt from around 50 meters out, that was exquisite. That was bellissimo, as the Italians would say. So overall, it's not all doom and gloom. You've got some stars there. So that brings our discussion of the West Coast versus Port Adelaide game to a close. Thank you very much, guys, for watching. If you like what you saw, you like what you heard, you liked us in general, please give us a like, subscribe. It's free, and free is good. We're going to be pumping up the content as much as we can. All the preseason will be covered here at the Centre Bounce. So please come with us on this journey.
Remember, guys, we've also got our Supercoach group. I'll put the information down in the description. You guys can win some amazing prizes. We've got a jersey, some AFL tickets to a game next year, and also an AFL voucher. Here at the Centre Bounce, guys, remember, we do the hard work so you don't have to. Bye for now.